Right. So I talk about sleaze in politics all the time. It cheapens it. It's shameful. It becomes a national embarrassment when it repeatedly happens. It often goes unreported just how awful some people in politics are. And more often than not, it's the Tories guilty of it, generally over some kind of financial gain because greed is their god. But Labour have done something so reprehensibly stupid, sickening, and, in my opinion, racist. It has exposed their claims of having dealt with racism as a sham, once more exposed their leader Keir Starmer's hypocrisy and two-facedness, and also undermined everything he has built his leadership on over the last 3 years, the stamping out of antisemitism, the dealing with racism. And he's done it to himself. This is completely self-inflicted. Now, Labour have put out some shameful attack adverts in their time, but this one could be an election killer. Whoever thought this advert was a great idea is exactly the sort of person Labour has been saying is throwing out of the party. Going down the avenue of saying Labour is the party of law and order, they've produced an image saying, "Do you think adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison?" Rishi Sunak doesn't. Their justification for this claim is that under the Tories, 4,500 adults convicted of sexually assaulting children under 16 serve no prison time. Labour will lock up dangerous child abusers. They feature a picture of Sunak in the ad as well. Now, raising the issue of Tory failures in Parliament on such an awful and harrowing topic is one thing, and entirely right and justified. That is exactly what the opposition should be doing. But Labour haven't done that. They've used the issue as electioneering material going into the local elections. Not only have they attempted to make capital out of child sex abuse, but by putting a picture of Sunak, a brown man, in the advert as well, when weighed against all the public claims being made predominantly against British Pakistani men by the likes of Suella Braverman, the commonly used racist trope that grooming gangs are made up of Muslims, even as an all-white grooming gang just got sent down for a combined total of 130 years just the other day, they are again in danger of promoting that mistaken belief held by the hard right. And you have to wonder, with how right-wing Labour under Starmer is veering, as to whether that was accidental because he's an incompetent half-wit, or intentional because that's actually how he thinks. Of course, I'm aiming this specifically at Keir Starmer. He, after all, must have seen this and signed off on it. The buck, at the end of the day, does stop with him somewhere along the line regardless, does it not? People have not stopped short of expressing their disgust at seeing this advert, and it's not come from just from across the political spectrum, but beyond it as well. Labour MP John McDonnell put out a tweet asking it to be withdrawn on the grounds it is not the sort of politics a party confident in its own values and preparing to govern should be putting out, and that his party is better than this. Maybe once upon a time, John. On the other side, Tory MP Tobias Ellwood called it appalling and said it threatened democratic process, adding that he calls such things out on his own side and was calling it out here. John Nicholson of the SNP called it absolutely nauseating and that politics was being cheapened and debased. Good Morning Britain presenter Adil Ray, having had a week of racist comments aimed at himself in regards to Suella Braverman's dog whistle regarding British Pakistanis, the same ethnic background as Ray himself, thus demonstrating the damage such commentary does cause, tweeted out, "Is this the right thing to say? Not long ago, Labour were complaining when Starmer was accused of ignoring Savile," referring to Starmer's time in charge of the Crown Prosecution Service, serving as Director of Public Prosecutions, as he bores us to death reminding us of constantly, where during his time there, his department decided against prosecuting the notorious rapist and paedophile Jimmy Savile back in 2009. And Starmer even went on to later comment when the decision was reviewed in 2012 by himself. He was still DPP until 2013. He upheld that decision, saying that the decisions taken at the time were the right decisions based on the information and evidence available. So as much as Savile was not a case Starmer personally investigated, he was instructed to review the case himself 3 years later, and he upheld it. So therein lies the hypocrisy. There was uproar when Boris Johnson played the Savile card in Parliament as an attempted PMQ's gotcha. But this advert attacking the Tories for nothing but political gain is no better at all. Furthering the hypocrisy, of course, is the fact that Starmer's own chief advisor is Peter Mandelson, who is well known to have associated on multiple occasions with serial child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, Epstein calling him PT, with numerous pictures demonstrating this scattered across the internet. Starmer has never really come in for much scrutiny over that, and that also begs the question as to why that should be, because he really bloody should. At time of writing, the advert being pushed by the Labour Party main Twitter account has had thousands of responses, overwhelmingly negative, more than 4,000 quote tweets alone slamming it, one of the biggest ratios on a tweet I've ever seen, generally a sign it's done badly when comments outweigh retweets, and still it remains up. It is so bad that Twitter itself, the plaything for Elon Musk as it now is, has actually added context to the tweet, clarifying that the tweet is implying that Rishi Sunak doesn't support prison sentences for sexual abuses against children, that the current sentencing for this crime is actually 14 years imprisonment, and that no Conservative plans exist to remove this. Has Starmer literally opened his party up to be sued over this then? Interesting notion, isn't it? That's not to say some Labour figures haven't been deployed to defend this and have done so, though Starmer himself has kept his head down as per usual, coward that he is. Shabana Mahmood retweeted the Labour Party tweet repeating the headline that Labour is the party of law and order. No, it's the party of barrel-scraping hypocrisy and racism here. Mahmood, as a brown-skinned woman herself, should know better. Steve Reid has tweeted out that Labour will lock up child abusers, Conservatives let them off. Again, these tweets are getting ratioed and shamed, and in Reid's case, with Starmer's background as aforementioned, he probably has more to answer for on this issue than Sunak does. Worst of all, though, was the god-awful Lucy Powell, who was deployed on this morning's media rounds and had an absolute car crash trying to defend this ad. Questioned on BBC Breakfast Time by Naga Chetty, Powell was asked, do you believe that Rishi Sunak doesn't think adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison? Powell replied, well, what I do know is that the figures that we've uncovered around those who are convicted of serious sexual assault are pretty startling, and also figures of those who were found guilty of sharing or producing or being involved in child pornography material, where we're seeing 16,000 people in those cases also not facing custodial sentences in recent years. And I think people would be pretty appalled about that. Those feeling like pretty lenient, people getting off lightly for what we would all regard as very serious offences, child sex abuse offences and child pornography material offences. And that's what we're highlighting today. These figures are very stark and show that there are real reasons why that is happening. At this point, Munchetti interrupted because, of course, Powell had dodged her question completely, saying, my question to you, though, was whether you believe that Rishi Sunak thinks that adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison. It's a pretty pertinent question since Labour stuck him on the advert. Powell began again, well, what I know is he's the Prime Minister of the country. He's in charge. But Munchetti had none of it, stopping her again, saying, you're telling me what you know, but you are the shadowed Secretary of State for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. Do you stand by this tweet? Referring, of course, to the tweet put out on the Labour Party main account featuring the offending advert. Powell goes, well, what I stand by is what the graphic is trying to show, which is the Prime Minister of our country is responsible for the criminal justice system of our country, and currently that criminal justice system is not working. Non-answer after non-answer from Lucy Powell, 3 times over, repeatedly declining to endorse the advert nor criticise it for fear of how she'd be seen by BBC Breakfast viewers. She's gone on to say it's all part of the cut and thrust of political debate and that it should not be deleted. So no, she doesn't actually seem to think it's wrong. That, or she's too afraid of Starmer to speak out of turn. Labour have exposed themselves as two-faced hypocrites given Starmer's track record, his own career in law and order, and people can draw their own conclusions over how much of a failure he's been on that score, both in terms of child sexual abuse or other failures as Director of Public Prosecutions, notably his failures to bring a case against the Met over the shooting of Jean-Charles de Menezes as one other example, but there are many more. This is a serious issue. It should be treated seriously, considerately, and sensitively, yet it has instead been used as political football for Starmer's lot to make some capital out of and drum up votes going into next month's local elections. Labour's poll lead has already been crumbling since last October. Slowly but surely the gap has been narrowing with the Tories as they ditched Liz Truss, and Labour still only has Starmer, standing there like a plank of wood, bleating about being Director of Public Prosecutions as if he's got a record to be proud of there when it's actually questionable, and boring us rigid by reminding us his father was a toolmaker and his mother was a nurse, the same dull, inane, well-worn-out sound bites we've all heard enough of, for which there's no substance beyond. To this day, we do not know really, after a dozen relaunches, what Starmer would actually do if he ever got into power. But he's prepared to play cards such as these, exploiting the exploitation of children for political gain. This is such a low, offensive blow. I would not be at all surprised to see polling crumble even faster as a result. This could even prove to be electorally fatal going forwards. Sunak, Lord knows there's plenty to take him apart over. He's a Tory. That's enough for many of us, never having voted for them and never will either. But it's the first brown Prime Minister. It's taken Labour just 6 months to link his leadership with child sex abuse, when these failures to prosecute, if true, were happening under his white predecessor previously. This isn't new then, but is an issue to be raised in Parliament, not to be used for electioneering, because that is twisted. In light of all the accusations of Muslims disproportionately guilty of these such offences, which isn't true, putting Sunak on their attack ad is a very bad look. And you just feel it isn't accidental that they've done it either. Very, very few people I can imagine will this actually appeal to. God only knows the sort of people it would appeal to. But it will drive more voters away than it attracts, because we're better than this as people. We're better than Keir Starmer and his loathsome front bench if this is their kind of politics. And if this is what is on offer in order to get the Tories out, then my God, what low standards you must have if you still think like that. Starmer's bringing political debate down into the gutter. Is gutter trash worth your vote? Thanks for watching. If you did appreciate this video, please do hit like and subscribe, leave a comment and hit the notification bell too, so you don't miss the next one. Also look out for me on social media and other interesting stuff by clicking on the Linktree link in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Cheers, folks.